Welcome back to Rad City Resin. I'm so glad to have you back in the studio with me today. I've been making so many holiday ornaments, and I have a few designs that I think you're really gonna love. So let's jump right into the first project. I'm starting off this first design with some 20 gauge craft wire. It doesn't really matter how long of a piece, you just want to have enough to create 2 round swirls. I'm going to curl in the end of the wire just to give it like a nice finish, and it'll be kind of difficult to do this once I make the bezel. So I'm using needle nose pliers, lining them up with the very end of the wire, and then quickly twisting it in a tight coil. If you try to go slow, it's going to look boxy, so just do it really fast. Now, I'm going to use a round glitter jar to create a small circle. I'm going to wrap the wire around at least twice, and then I'm going to bend the other side in the opposite direction with a slightly bigger jar. Now, don't worry if the circle is a little bigger than you were planning. We are going to use our fingers to keep tightening the circle to create a spiral. And as we do this, it's going to pull the wire tighter and tighter and create smaller circles. And when we're done, we should have like an S shape with one larger circle and one smaller circle. Next, we're going to use some masking tape to cover the back of this bezel. You can decide which way you want it to face, but for now, I have a backward S shape. I'm going to flood this shape with UV resin, and I need enough to make sure that it touches all of the edges without pulling away from the wire. But I also need to make sure that the resin doesn't spill over the edges. So if I have to start with a smaller amount and then fill in any spaces where it did pull away from the wire, that's totally okay. Once the resin fully coats the inside of the form, I'm going to cure it for about 2 minutes. I'm going to use this white iridescent glitter to add color and a little bit of fun texture to my piece. I poured some into my little silicone cup, then I topped it with a really healthy dollop of UV resin. Now, this isn't going to cure super solidly, but by the time our piece is fully finished, it's going to stay put. I'm going to use this old paintbrush. It's kind of it's past its prime. It has some resin in the bristles, but it still works. And I'm going to use this to spread out as much of the glitter over the surface as I can. If I need to, I can always add more resin or more glitter. And when I'm satisfied with this glitter layer, I'm going to cure it for at least 3 minutes. Again, it's not going to be totally solid, but that's okay. We're going to work with it. For the record, anytime I'm working with multiple layers like this, I'm always very careful not to touch the surfaces. When UV resin is still warm from UV light, it's going to be soft and it's going to feel tacky. So resist the urge to touch it and then wait until it fully cools down and then see if it's still sticky. Let it cool down before you try to touch it. It'll make a big difference. I decided that this side was going to be the back side of my ornament. So on the back side, I'm going to use some liquid acrylic paint for the back. And this is going to make that background look more white as opposed to like the blue, orangey, pink of the glitter. I'm going to use my finger for this. Now, I've worked with acrylic paint since I was really young, and I know how my skin reacts to it. If you decide to use paint in this way, like finger painting, do a small patch test by putting a small dot of it on your skin and take it off when it's dried, or, wipe it away. This will help you know if your skin's going to become inflamed by the paint. I smoothed it out, but I did leave a little bit of texture to the paint. You could use a brush or a palette knife to make it super smooth, but personally, I like having that texture. It really does kind of look almost like it's been finger painted. Because it was. I let this dry for about 4 hours. It was a pretty thick layer, and I wanted to make sure that there was absolutely no moisture left when I added my final resin coat to this side. Next, while that dries, I'm going to take another piece of wire and make 2 90-degree angle bends near the center of the wire, about an inch or so apart. I'm basically trying to make 3 sides of a rectangle here. I'm going to leave a small tail on each side and then bend again. If you haven't guessed it yet, we're making a tiny hat. I'm going to curl the excess wire back inward to create the brim of the hat. Now you could trim away the excess wire here, but I decided to loop them around to create the cutest little bow. I added painter's tape to the back of this piece and then I filled it with UV resin. Now, one question that comes up pretty frequently is, how do I keep my resin inside of the bezel? What if it flows out? And that's definitely a great question. And if you work from the center of your form outward and you work quickly, you won't see a ton of spillage. But if it does happen to spill beyond the frame, which, let's be real, it happens to me all the time, it's not a big deal. You can always trim it away with flush cutters or nail clippers, or even just some really good scissors. And if you had a lot of spillage, you can always trim away the excess and then sand it down with a rotary tool. I peeled my hat off the tape, and once again, I used my finger to paint the back side of this in a nice dark black. I also let this dry for the same 4 hours that I was waiting for the other piece. Now, once everything was completely dry, I applied one more layer of resin on the back of my piece, and then I cured it for 2 minutes, and that was just to lock in all of the paint and make sure that it wasn't going to peel away. Once my piece cooled down, I peeled off the painter's tape to reveal the front side. You can see on the front that there's a line of demarcation where the tape overlapped. Ideally, you'd really want your backing tape to be one solid piece, but I am going to build up a few layers of resin on the front here, so it's not going to be super noticeable. Before curing this layer, I laid the hat on the top circle and then I cured all of it for 2 minutes. You could definitely stop here and have a cute as hell little snowman ornament, but I cannot be contained. I'm in my mooding era. Everything is in excess and I am ungovernable. So I knew I needed to make some accessories. Now the neck area where the 2 circles met, it kind of felt a little weird. So I decided I wanted to cover that section. I started by taking my wire and bending it into a rectangle shape that would be wide enough to cover that section. Then I bit the longer length of wire at a 90-degree angle and I created a longer rectangle with a sort of ribbon shape at the bottom. I backed this piece with tape and applied a layer of UV resin, and I used some opaque resin pigment to color it a really pretty peachy red color. Then, once that was dry, I topped it with a layer of resin, and then I also used a little bit of resin to apply it onto the snowman, but honestly, you could use glue or whatever else you might have on hand. I added a tiny carrot nose made from the smallest triangle I could possibly make, and here he is. I love his little face. So what do you think? Would you put this on your tree? Now, Project 2 is really fun because you can really customize it however you want. You could make it a theme, you could make it certain colors. There's a lot of different things that you could do. So apparently I didn't film the wire bending part, but it's just a series of loops in a basic V shape. Then I brought the loops inward at the bottom to give the shape, to make the shape, and it turned out to be the fattest Christmas tree ever, which is just perfect for me. Just like our last project, I added tape to the back side and filled the wire frame in with a layer of resin. I then cured that resin until it was nice and solid. I used several drops of Piccassio alcohol ink in the color emerald. Then I used a clean paintbrush to spread that around the frame. If this dries too quickly, you can use a little bit of alcohol, a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to reactivate it. And you can let this dry naturally, or if you're super, super careful and you have to promise and take an oath that you're going to be careful, but you can use a lighter or a torch to burn off the alcohol. Now, please make sure you're wearing protective gear when you're doing this. Open flames are dangerous at the best of times, but when you're using it around resin and you're releasing those fumes into the air, you definitely want to remember gloves, glasses, gas mask. Those are the rules. I topped this layer of alcohol ink with another thin layer of resin and cured it for about 2 minutes. Now here's where you can really make this fun. I used some little rhinestones in 4 different colors laid out along the tree to make it look like little Christmas lights. But you could also use tinsel, glitter, little charms to decorate this however you'd like. I actually think maybe like a little pink tree with some ballet slippers or something, as a tree topper. That would be so freaking cute. You can also play with the loops and the tree shape to get different effects there as well. So here's another example of this technique. For the third project, I'm going to make another tree. Sort of. Is there anything more iconic than a Little Debbie Christmas tree cake? Maybe a Coca-Cola polar bear, but it's a near miss. I started this project by making a small triangle. I made another triangle maybe about twice as big and trimmed the top off of it to fit right underneath that first layer of the tree. I repeated this step one more time with a slightly bigger triangle so that I had 3 rungs of this tree. Now you can play around with the angles and the size of each layer until you're happy with how the silhouette looks. Once I was happy with it, I laid each layer onto a piece of glittery duct tape. Now, originally, I thought about using this as the background of the tree, but it was a lot more silver than I really wanted. So instead, I cured that first layer, and then I grabbed my white pearl mica powder by Rolio and mixed about a teaspoon's worth or so into more UV resin. I poured this over the frame and then smoothed it into every single corner. And once I was happy with how smooth it turned out, I cured it. Now I have this little card album that I keep all of my depotted eyeshadows in. I don't wear a lot of makeup anymore, but I really loved these colors. So I took them out of the pans, crushed them as smoothly as I could, and then put them into little baggies that I keep stored in this album. It really comes in handy because I can see everything all at once, and then I can take out what I need and then put it right back, and I don't lose little packets. I have this super pretty red color. I have no idea where it came from or what color it is, but it is a bright shimmery red. I mixed a little bit of this with some UV resin right there on my silicone pad, and then I used a clean paintbrush to make stripes over the white background. You can add as many or as few stripes as you want. If you look at one of these, some have lots of stripes, some only have a few, so you can really make this look however you want it to. And now that I'm thinking about it, how cute would this be if I made one that looked like it had a little bite taken out of it? That would be adorable. So I cured this layer for 4 full minutes to make sure it was solid. I didn't want to touch it, so I just trusted the process. I added 1 more layer of resin, and then before curing, I sprinkled on some fine green glitter over that top layer and then cured everything for another 2 minutes. I love how this turned out. It's so cute. I'm not sure if I'm gonna keep it as an ornament, or it's kind of small, so I could even wear it as a pendant. If you want even more ornament ideas, I recently did a live stream where I showed how to make these gorgeous snowflake ornaments, and these are going to be in everyone in my family's stocking this year. Check out the video for live step-by-step walkthroughs of both of these, and I plan to do more of these live streams, so if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button so you always know what's happening in Rad City. Thank you so much for hanging out today. I had so much fun with these projects. They were really great. It was a lot of learning and a lot of playing around, and I hope you get to try them out. So go make something awesome today, and as always, stay rad. Check out more resin tutorials by visiting this playlist.